Watchers Show. I'm your host, Matt Meyer, coming at you from Oklahoma City. With me, as ever, are my fellow Watchers, Nicholas Osborne and Mike Eakins. Gentlemen, say hello.
Hey.
Hello, everyone.
Hey to the kids at home.
Yeah.
So, we have, as promised last week, an awesome episode this week. We have got our very first historic Accept No Substitutes guest on the show, professional guest, I should say, Mr. Zack Kaplan, writer from Aftershock Comics. Join the future. Zack, thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Both humbled and grateful to have your presence here. So,
thank you.
Man, Aftershock has been really good to you this week. Join the Future came out Join the Future #1 came out, written by you, art by Piotr Kowalski, and colors by Brad Simpson. I read it. I loved it. I got to ask you, I've always been told by my sci-fi that I should either fear or fight the future. Tell me about Join the Future. Tell our listeners about Join the Future.
Join the Future is a sci-fi western, and it looks at a future America where mega cities have developed so much technology and advancement they can offer you everything you would ever want. A utopian lifestyle of free healthcare, universal basic income, housing, and education. And all they ask is that you join them. And there are a few small towns in the ongoing trend that has taken place over many, many years. Small towns have declined. People have moved to the cities. And what is left in rural America is but a few holdouts who don't want to join the future. They want to live life the way they want. And there is a clash of these two worlds. And it follows a young woman, Clementine Libby, who is caught in the middle of these two worlds.
Awesome. And for the record, we all read and loved the first issue so much. So congratulations. It really is an awesome comic. But yeah, hey, we've got questions. That's why you're here. Nick is going to start this thing off.
Yeah, definitely. I was so excited as soon as I saw anything about this issue or this series, because I'm actually from a very rural area myself in Carthage, Texas. And I think that town very much defined small town America in a lot of different ways. So in Join the Future, as soon as I read the first issue, it feels like a deconstruction of this type of community when confronted with the sweeping tides of progress. So can you talk a little about your own worldview and how it influenced this contrast, and what themes you hope to explore with Clementine through this world?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually grew up in a small town earlier in my life. I grew up in the Quad Cities, Iowa, right across from cornfields. And I remember it being a very Spielbergian kind of experience in the Midwest in the 80s, and very idealistic and very, very simple. And I don't know if that's just my nostalgia looking back on childhood, but I think, I tried to approach these two different worlds without any judgment on either one. I think that there is a lot of value in progress in the mega cities and the things that they have, and there's a lot of value in small town lifestyle. And it's really just to set up the dichotomy. But obviously, I think the great science fiction always explores some sort of warning, and I think the aspect to consider is, as we embrace futurism and progress and technology, what are we sacrificing, not in a enslavement, but in a change to our society? What are you sacrificing in your loss of privacy, in your loss of individuality, in your loss of the ability to just have isolation and or be self-sufficient and not rely on everything being delivered to your front door or being suggested in your apps? So I think these are all things that we can relate to right now. And I don't know that I'm always the first to kind of jump on new technology, so I actually like all that stuff. But I can't help but kind of wonder what we're allowing everything to happen so fast here. What price are we paying, and what are we losing? And so this was a way to explore all of that.
Well, and there's always an allure to the new, you know? And I feel like your frontiersman, your frontiers town, is not necessarily a rebuke of that or anything, but just kind of like you said, putting the brakes on things a little bit. Let's take a look at the whole picture before we just dive in headlong. So I've got a lot of small town background myself, even though I live in the city now. So I can definitely identify with that.
No.
Mike, what'd you have?
Yeah, kind of keeping with that theme of.
Guys, we had a little of technical difficulties. I lost you for a second there.
No, I think we got you back.
Well, do you mind repeating the question for a second? We're talking about technology here.
Yeah.
Oh, the irony.
Yeah. So in sticking with the real world isms, if you will, can you take us through the process of when you sit down with a project, and how much of your current mood, or how much maybe of the current maybe political situations, or do you kind of zen out? Do you have like a little quiet space type deal? Like how do you get ready for this project, or for any project in that matter, and to carry on?
I approach the storytelling aspect of it and the comic book production aspect of it relatively the same way each time I'm undertaking a project, but invariably the things that are going on in life and in the world and the news that I'm watching, it all kind of affects me in some way. I know that this is not about Journey to the Future, but when I was writing Port of Earth, this was closer to the kind of the renewed the loss of faith in our institutions right around 2016, and how no matter what side you were on, we didn't really know what to believe or what to trust, and we all felt kind of like voyeurs simply watching all of this drama unfold, and so that really got brought into Port of Earth, and so I it's hard for me to totally understand what of the past year has seeped into this. I think that will kind of make itself known as people read it and they tell me what they're taking from it. But yeah, I definitely think that whatever mood I'm in, I think Clementine Libby is a young woman who is been growing up in this environment and never really had to think of her place in the world or how she wants to define herself. And this is it's both a story, a wake up call for her, and it's a story of resistance, and it's a story of her attempt to become empowered. And I think that that's obviously something that maybe last year in 2019, we're all trying to feel. We'd all like to feel more empowered and more in control of our world, and not feel like the mega cities, whatever that domination that we feel like is preventing us from getting back to our normalcy or our ideals or our values. That there is this struggle. So I'm sure that there will be some correlations that people can draw from. But in terms of the craft, I come up with an idea, I spend time with it, I break the story, I put it into treatment and outline, and then break down into issues. And in terms of putting the project together, that's all pretty much the same, regardless of what. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
Very cool. Thanks. Yeah, very cool.
So I'll tell you, and this just kind of build on something that Mike was saying, is that I'm a sucker for world building. Give me a comic that's just got a fully fleshed out, fully realized environment, and I'm in. Join the Future speaks to that. I mean, some other Port of Earth did as well, and it's so well thought out. It's almost deceptively simple in a way, at least judging by the first issue. And key word there, deceptive. How long have you been stewing on this concept, and how did you put it all together, and what maybe didn't make the cut?
I remember I like to read a lot about futurism and about what is going to take place in the future, and and kind of the concept of mega cities and technology is always something that comes up. But the correlation to that and small town America, there's a lot of stuff out there written about how over time people are moving more and more towards cities, and the population and urbanization and that demographic. And it just made me wonder, well, where does this end? And in the future, as we talk about futurism, how does the small town survive, or does it not survive? And so that kind of clash of mega city and small town somehow brought ideas of a Western to my mind. And it reminded me of those the Westerns where the railroad's coming in and they say civilization is coming. But it's interesting that it's backwards in this regard, because they're not bringing civilization as much as taking civilization away. And then I guess once I had that kind of landscape, I fleshed out, well, how are these megacities recruiting people, and what are they offering? But it was my goal not to make it overly dystopian or overly two-dimensional. I wanted the megacity to seem relatively normal and deceptively, so many people read it and say, well, why wouldn't I join? And
yeah, why wouldn't you want to live there?
There's really no reason why you wouldn't want to live there. In and of itself, there is nothing wrong with it until you compare it to small town living and you see the sacrifice that you may make, and then you kind of go, oh, well, I don't like the idea of not being able to take care of myself, or not being able to grow my own food, or not being able to do this, or I do like to know my neighbors, and I don't know, is there something lost? Obviously what was cut, I made a conscious choice to introduce the world of the megacity and then come into Clementine's world, in the small town world, spend more time there. I would have enjoyed spending a little more time seeing the megacity, but I thought it was ultimately the conflict and the central, the clash of these worldviews is taking place in this town of Franklin with Clementine's family, and so that's where I spent most of the story.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting that you alluded to Westerns, because it's such a strong, and maybe the strongest American archetype out there,
Yes.
or myth, if you will. And just kind of seeing this get flipped on its head a little bit, very, very, very canny move, I think.
Yeah.
And
yeah, definitely, because that getting to that world building aspect of it, I think, a part of that, I'm also intrigued about, the way this duality is set up in this dichotomy. But I think after reading it and like being able to sink my teeth into it, Clementine is like what's going to pull me back into this next issue.
Yeah.
And, I think she's a character I can just really relate to. Like I said, coming from a small town, seeing that conflict. So I noticed you mentioned last time we spoke via email that it was a coming of age story. So were there some challenges in particular of writing a young girl growing up in this world specifically?
I don't know. I wanted to try to capture as much nuance to her as possible early on, so that readers could feel that she is torn between the allure of technology and the future and what that megacity might offer, and her loyalty to her. She has a tremendous amount of loyalty to her upbringing. She's not yearning to get as far away from this as possible. She can see the value in small town. She can see the value in her father's wisdom. She can see the value in her family, but she also can't help but wonder, is this all for her? And I thought that duality was a much stronger way to define her and the conflict that she's going to have, to give the reader both of those in this first issue, rather than just set her up as one archetype, like I'm just yearning to, Luke Skywalker get off this planet.
Right.
Then because it's not really about her coming to one. Really, it's really about that pull throughout. And so, in terms, I tried my best to capture the voice of a young woman as much as I could, but it was some ways easier because I tried to make, she is a little bit of a tomboy. She is a little bit of she wants to go hunt with other guys, and there's one exchange in the story where there's a couple exchanges in the story where her gender is brought up in kind of a what role she should be playing, and you can sense that that's not the role that she wants to play. She wants to be able to define herself. So No, no, no. I'm a father of 2 young children. I tried to think of myself more as as how I interact with the from the paternal side of it all, and then capture her just as a character.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I really like because I mean one of the first scenes you're introduced to, I fell in love because she's the one holding the rifle.
yeah,
And I was like, yes, that's what I want to see.
yeah. And she's impulsive and confident, and she charges in to handle something. And yeah, and yeah, introducing this family and on a hunting trip, and she's willing to tell her dad, hey, back off. I'm and so she has a tremendous amount of spirit and tenacity, and that makes you love. It makes you love her and both fear for what's to come, because you have this mega city and this technology looming. And ultimately, one of the things I'm most excited for readers to discover as the story continues is that you have this strong protagonist, but how on earth can she possibly go up against such a powerful advancement in futurism and technology in these and this landscape if she's not to embrace it? And then to embrace it would be to her own detriment of her ideals. To embrace it would be to turn her back on the very thing that she's trying to that other side of her. So it's a very fascinating dilemma, which is a dilemma that we all face.
Keeping in rhythm with Clementine, because she's definitely someone that I enjoyed reading about, and she's definitely a character that you almost find yourself running around your LCS, going to customer, and like, have you read about her? Have you read this? Have you read this? And you got to really read this. Is she based off of anyone that you came across in a real life situation, or did she just grow organically as the story took shape? Because she is definitely someone that you hit on. She's loyal, but she's curious. Is she doing the right thing? And she's just one of those characters that you just see growing and growing, and you find yourself rooting for.
It's not based on anyone per se. I think my daughter's 5, and I think Clementine is based on all the attributes that I would want my daughter to have.
Awesome.
So, I want my daughter to be both headstrong but thoughtful. I want her to be both curious but loyal. So I think all of these things come from, and that's not, and I want her to be able to take on the challenges that would arrive in life, on her own. And the self-sufficiency is something that I value very much as a parent trying to guide her through life. And it's such a crazy life to guide a kid through, because we've got
Absolutely.
social media and all these things that I haven't even. She's only 5. I haven't even begun to scratch the surface of having how to deal with raising someone in the face of such progress in technology. But I think in terms of how I thought about her, it wasn't anyone in particular. It was just certain ideals and certain characteristics that I greatly value and hope for. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Awesome.
Matt.
So, kind of threading the needle between Join the Future and Port of Earth a little bit, I've noticed there's a running theme of scenarios that are just a little bit in the future and just outside of the realm of possibility now, but we could very easily see them happening. What kind of draws you to this sort of, and you just said deliberately you didn't want to go dystopian, so I don't want to use that word, but what draws you to looking at the current state of the world with such an eye?
It is it can be very subtly dystopian. Certainly, I like to explore stories about the individual versus the world or versus society. And I just find that science fiction and futurism is a great platform for that. I love science fiction, but I don't like over the top science fiction. So I really like to ask readers to come just on one leap of faith with me. And then once you say, well, okay, I'll accept this one premise that aliens have come with a business deal. I like it to just all unfold as realistically as possible. I think even Eclipse, if you guys are familiar with my first series, the sunlight has turned deadly. And this is a very over-the-top idea, and certainly it creates a very over-the-top landscape, but then everything that happens is very character-driven and very grounded. So I just like that type of story. I like stories that make us think, that feel very, I don't know, for me, the closer it is to possible, the more it makes me think about my own life and my own world. And I really enjoy that phenomenon in stories.
Awesome. Nick?
No, I think to that approach to your comics and in the way you approach your storytelling, I think it allows for, like you said, this one premise that really drives everything, but it's the characters you really latch on to. And that's what I found I've appreciated. I started with Eclipse, and that kind of turned me on to your writing, and then Port of Earth happened, and so this happened. I was so excited to see you foray into Westerns because it was a bit new. But as far as Aftershock Comics goes, they've been getting a lot of attention lately for their really stellar books. And I was interested to see the pairing with Join the Future and Aftershock Comics. So was there something in particular about them that you thought would be a good fit for this series?
No. I love Aftershock Comics. They're a great publisher. I came onto them very early on when they first came out of the gate. I noticed them as early as Animosity. And that first string of books that they had come out, I was really blown away by. And I was just getting started, and I reached out to them and developed a relationship. We did Lost City Explorers, and this is my second book. I haven't really gotten to the place where I'm able to discern the right project for the right publisher. I just find something that I'm passionate about. I'm looking for publishers that are passionate about that same story, and then I'm looking to tell that story with the publisher that I value and that I connect with. And I've worked with Image Top Cow, which is a great publisher, and Aftershock is a great publisher. And it wasn't that I thought that this story was uniquely perfect for Aftershock as much as I said I'd like to do something more with you, and here's this idea, and they were also passionate about it. But I mean they have a great way of delivering very strong creator-owned content, and I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a boom time for indie comics. I mean, people talk about the black and white boom of the 80s, but I think we've got the 80s beat at this point between Aftershock and Boom and Ahoy and all these awesome publishers. So, I mean, just the fact that you get to choose, I think is remarkable in and of itself. But, tell us just a little bit about your background with comics. I mean, what did you come up reading?
Oh, well, when I was a kid, I didn't have anybody I read comics growing up, but I didn't have any older siblings or any friends that read comics. And when I look back and I compare my childhood reading comics to other people's, it was I was not aware of. I had one comic book shop I went to. I picked up, the basics in terms of X-Men or Wolverine or Batman, but I never bothered to consider the creative teams behind those comics. I was always thinking about cross media, whether it was like Saturday morning cartoons that I was always watching. And the occasional time I branched out, I did get into Spawn when it first came out, or the Max. I did like G.I. Joe and some other things like that. But I wasn't a very educated or aware comic reader in my childhood and my adolescence. It wasn't till I went to college and I tried to swear off comics altogether. I tried to swear off everything nerdy in comics in my hope of
I think we all went through that at some point.
Yeah, and then I kind of realized, wait a minute, I like all these things, and also they started to become more and more popular. And so it was right early 20s coming out of college when I kind of came back to them. And that was right around early 2000s and that was when I discovered creator-owned comics, Warren Ellis, Greg Rucka, Why the Last Man, Preacher, all of these things that I kind of went, wait a minute, these are comics? I thought X-Men was comics, but this is also comics, because this stuff's amazing. And it kind of made me fall in love with the original stories in comics. And then I was at the same time I always wanted to be a storyteller, and I was pursuing film and TV. And so it was right around that time that I started to say, well, gee, this would be really cool to write a comic one day, and this would be cool to do this because I now understand that there are people who do this, but I never thought about it in being a comic book creator. Even when I was trying to do Eclipse, it was only the novelty of doing a comic. And it wasn't until I did Eclipse that I went, this is amazing, and I loved it, and I just really didn't want to do anything but this. And and that's I've been very much all in terms of trying to create as many comics as I can since then. So it was that was really my evolution with it, falling in love with those really thought-provoking comics between '01 and '05, and just that Vertigo phase of it all. That was when I really started to learn. But then I even now I find myself learning more and more about comics because I'm in the middle of the craft, and I'm in the middle of it all, and it's such an amazing time now for creator-owned comics and for original content. So yeah.
Absolutely. So bonus follow-up question.
Yes.
Marvel or DC?
Oh.
Marvel or DC?
Which one? You don't, someone's threatening you to pick one or the other. Which is it going to be?
Well, I will say this. I will say this. One of my favorite comic book creators right now, and the favorite ways of telling stories, Tom King, and the kind of thing he did with Mr. Miracle. I find this to be a fascinating way to approach the superhero genre. I just picked up Strange Adventures, and I thought the first issue was amazing. I really like this idea of deconstructing the classic superhero and just opening it up. And there are a lot of creators doing this at both Marvel and DC. But to me, the opportunity to do that kind of thing would be a dream come true. So I know DC has done that, and I think that's very exciting. But I know Marvel has done that in some ways too. So here's the funny thing. I don't know. I'll have to ask my daughter. She's really into both now. It's been really awesome. I'm reading her as much content as I can, and here's the other thing I will say. I find that DC seems to have stronger female characters when I'm reading to my daughter. When I read the Avengers, she's looking at the landscape and she's saying, I like Black Widow, but what else, or Captain Marvel. So there's some, but Wonder Woman, Batgirl, there's a lot. So I do like, as a father of a young daughter, tapping into the strong female characters of DC. But man, I don't know. I'd like to write for both of them. So you don't get me in trouble.
Okay, all right. Marvel or DC? Get cracking. Mike, well, listen, Zach, we're with respect to your time, we're going to start trying to wind it down a little bit. Mike, do you have anything else that you want to throw Zach's way?
No, I just want to say thanks for your time, and thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just having you on the show and be able to talk about this a little more, shining some light on stories like this in such a golden age of indie creator comics, and I really think that your stories are kind of spearheading that charge with a lot of great stuff.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Absolutely. So without getting into spoiler territory, what can we look forward to in future issues of Join the Future?
The one thing I'll say is there's another major character in Join the Future that is only hinted at, and he plays a very pivotal role in the future of the series. And once he comes in, it really, for me, elevates the story even more. And so I'm very excited for audiences to meet this character and interact with him. But I don't want to spoil it, so I'll just say that there is a pivotal character coming, and I think he helps to elevate the story, and I'm excited for that.
Awesome. Well, hey, we always end this show. Go ahead.
Yeah. Because I can't say it enough on this book. Peter Kowalski and Brad Simpson are just at God level on this book. The artwork is amazing, And for anybody who has not seen Join the Future yet, who's interested in what I'm saying, add to that it is some of the best, most beautiful artwork out there. These guys have been doing great stuff on Bloodborne, and Sex is an image book that Peter did, and I think they have Wellington out right now as well. But it's just unbelievable stuff, and it gets better every issue. So I'm also extremely excited for readers to see what they have in store for the future of the book and the art.
Yeah, most definitely. Peter and Brad are doing bang-up work, and they really should. All of you guys deserve a hell of a lot of recognition. So, keep them coming. And we got one more question for you. And we always end the show with doing a round robin of this question ourselves, okay? What have you been reading, and what are you looking forward to reading that's coming out soon?
I just read Strange Adventures. I picked up Kingdom Nowhere, but I haven't read it yet. I'm gonna read that. I'm very excited about that one. I read The Plot, which is amazing. So good.
So good.
And I just picked up Something is Killing the Children, the whole volume, because I read the first 2 issues, and I am excited to catch up and read the whole thing, because the first 2 issues is just such a cool concept and such a great character, and I'm very excited about that one. I just picked up I love the second volume of Die, and I just picked up I catch up on Middle West. I just picked up the second volume of that, which I'm very excited about. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Indie picks all around. Go figure.
Well, yeah.
Well, Zack Kaplan, thank you so much for spending the last half hour or so hanging out with us.
Guys, appreciate it.
You're welcome back anytime. The comic is Join the Future. The issue is #1. It's from Aftershock Comics, written by Zack Kaplan, art by Peter Kowalski and Brad Simpson. Zack, thank you so much for being here. Can't say it enough.
Thank you.
All right. So now that we've got our extra special guests out of the way, we are going to dive into this week's news with Mr. Scoop Johnson.
Scoop, I'm back.
Scoop in the house.
We're back in the house, or at least the townhouse, depending on where you're at. But it's fine. Anyway, news. Here we go. We're gonna start off with some DC action. Sandman. For all you crazy kids that want to put on the headphones and listen to some Sandman, DC is partnered up with Audible, and they are going to be launching a multi-part audio drama later this year based on the Sandman. So that looks pretty good. Continuing with DC news, for fans of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane, all good things must come to an end, because I believe June, we'll see the last issues of those 2 books. So, in Boom news, this is kind of cool. Faithless from Brian Azzarello is going to get a high-end issue that is going to be a WonderCon exclusive. They're only making 100 copies of this. Faithless is really cool. They just got done with issue 6. This is actually going to be Faithless 2. They're continuing on, because Faithless is an erotic depiction of the Divine Comedy.
Ew.
Right. Now, I accidentally picked this up. I'm not really into erotic comics. However, I really do love. Don't see, Nick. I saw the smirk, sir.
You got to throw in. I'm not really into it, but you can be into it. It's okay.
I bought it for Brian Azzarello. Okay. Anyway, no. So this book is actually really good. It's definitely not for anybody, because some of the covers do get, got me a little, sweaty under the beard. But it is a good book. It is a good book, but definitely not for everybody. But anyway, Faithless 2, #1, coming out at WonderCon, and Brian's going to be exclusively signing these books over at WonderCon. So check that out. Sweet. And because we can't go one show without talking about Valiant, Exo Manowar We got those covers up on the website right now. Creative team of Dennis Hallam, Emilio Lass, I'm going to screw that up, Lassow, we'll say that, I apologize. Erica Henderson, Daniel Warren, Justin Weaver, they all got variant covers, which are on the website, looking really good too. These covers are pretty gorgeous. Definitely going to be picking those up. Image, which is really cool. For those who haven't read Mercy, which is a really good horror book that just came out from Image today, I believe. No, yesterday. They have actually sent it back for emergency printing because it's all sold out. It literally, all the shops have, there is no more. So Image is already going to a second printing with it. But definitely check it out. It's a really good horror book. And that's
Mike,
it.
was there any big announcements that came out of C2E2 this week?
Do we have any? I know there was big. We got the X-Men one, but I missed those.
We had boots on the ground.
X of Swords business going on. The first major crossover of the Dawn of X, Jonathan Hickman era, with perhaps the most unwieldy title ever, and nobody can quite decide if it's X of Storms, Cross of Storms, 10 of Storms, or pick your poison. It's coming this summer, and it's the first big mile marker for the Dawn of X saga. So there's a lot of swords in the promo art. You should buy it if you like X-Men. Yeah. But I think that was probably it for the news this week, Mike, unless you had more. Nick, did you have anything to add to that?
I don't think so. We've got Bloodshot coming out next week.
We
That's newsworthy. Go see it. Buy tickets. Go see it. I'm so ready for it.
Yeah.
I am ready for a movie where Vin Diesel hits things.
As Bloodshot, yes.
And also shoots things.
Interesting.
Hey, who knew, right? So, okay, all right. Well, I think that's it for the news this week. So it goes when news is crammed in the middle of the episode. Guys, this was awesome. We had our first guest. I want to just really take a moment to mark that occasion, and I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah. That's right. So we're actually running a little bit short this week, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, you've got other podcasts like Valiant Watch you could be listening to. So I guess let's wrap this mummy. Nick, what are you looking forward to? What have you been reading? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, let's see. Aside from that, I've been reading Join the Future, like literally right before the show. Yeah. I've been reading a lot of both Valiant and Zenescope, just going back and forth between the two. Been reading a lot of Bloodshot to get up to date with the movie and alternating that with the Grimm fairy tales because I've been catching up. I like to do this so I don't get burnt out too much on one series. So I just kind of bounce around and kind of read one issue and go back. And I think, ultimately what I'm excited for is the rest of what Valiant has in store for us, because this Bloodshot date that is really exciting for the company is like a huge step forward for both the publishing side and a general awareness. And the Valiant Watch show is kind of born of this initiative of Valiant 2020. And there's so much happening and so much to talk about that a show can't contain all of it. And I think it's really exciting to be on the forefront of this, and it's a great time to jump in. So that's what I'm hyped for.
Awesome. Mike, how about you? What have you been reading? What are you looking forward to?
Been reading Dark Agnes for Marvel and Becky Cloonan. It's kind of cool because we talked about Marvel's, I guess, initiative or whatever. They're bringing more Howard stuff to Marvel, and where it's just not Conan, which are great stories, but Howard's world is just so in depth and so wide. You could really go on forever. And Dark Agnes is really good. 2 just came out, so the series is not that deep into it yet. Definitely worth checking out, because as old as the story is, there's a really good modernization to it without it completely getting away. Like, it's still the story, it's still the original story, but with just a fresh take on it. So it's not like a reboot or something like that where they're trying to redo it. But it's definitely a tip of the cap to the original. It's really good. You should check it out. As far as what I'm looking forward to, IDW is going to have a huge 100-page Judge Dredd that's coming out. Tons of artists, tons of writers. It's going to be celebrating all of Mega City 1 and all that good stuff. So really looking forward to that as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I have been, no pun intended, I promise, diving into more Aquaman. I know, it couldn't be avoided.
Good night, folks.
Be avoided. But I picked up the first couple issues of Tom Veitch's Volume 5, which debuted around, I think it was 2004. This is after he came back from the dead and for the first time, and he had a weird water hand, and it was kind of like this bizarre half measure between, well, we got so much mileage out of replacing his hand with the harpoon, but it maybe run its course, but we don't want to go back on it, and it's just weird. He gets banned from the oceans, and so he has to hang out in like rivers and lakes and things. Very odd.
So it's like he got evicted. Did he not pay his ocean rent or something? I mean,
listen, man, the rent is astronomical in Atlantis. Okay, you have no idea. They do not believe in rent control. But that run, it leads into the Sub Diego story, which opens. It was written by Will Pfeiffer and art by a young whippersnapper named Patrick Gleason, who we all know and love. And that story, like cold opening, San Diego has fallen into the ocean and there's like thousands and thousands of people dead. And that's how the story starts. And it is riveting stuff. So I can't wait to read more of that. What I'm looking forward to Robin Year One by Chuck Dixon.
There you go.
Sweet little mini series that I think a lot of people just overlooked at the time it came out. But awesome early art by Marcos Martin, so killer thing there. And then there's this week we've got a trade called Batman City of Crime, and it collects about 15 issues, I think, maybe 13, 14 of Detective Comics that were written by David Lapham of Stray Bullets fame. Ooh. And if you haven't read Stray Bullets, you haven't read Hard-Boiled Comics. Detective fiction, and I am just super thrilled to dive into what this guy can do in the world of Batman. So I'm looking very, very forward to that. But other than that, I think we're good. Gentlemen, it has been an absolute pleasure. This has been This has been episode 69 of the Comic Watchers Show. I'm your host, Matt Meyer. This is Nicholas Osborne and Mike Eakins. We are a part of the Comic Watch family. You can find us at comic-watch.com. Pro news and reviews written by fans for fans. I want to once more give a major shout out to our first official pro guest, Mr. Zack Kaplan, for stopping by. So, support your LCS, keep reading those funny pages, and we will catch you next week for something so epic, so amazing. We're not even going to, I'll tell you, David Dastmalchian is coming to our show. That's right, David freaking Dastmalchian. You know him as that guy with the Russian accent from Ant-Man, and we know him from writing Count Crowley. And we cannot wait to talk to him. So we will see you all next week.